Good evening to all of you. Greetings from Jaipur and Eternal Hospital. Today I'm going to talk to you about a very important clinical issue, which is prevention of heart disease and what can be done for this. We all know that the disease is increasing rapidly in India, and these are the latest data from the Global Burden of Disease study showing that in the red line, ischemic heart disease deaths and ischemic heart disease burden both are increasing, not only in terms of absolute number, where India is number one, but also in terms of relative numbers of the rates, where now India has achieved the highest level of burden. The question is why the ischemic heart disease is increasing in our country. What we have done is to identify multiple factors. It could be a socio-biological phenomena, that means socio-economic evolution, migration, urbanization. There could be contribution of major risk factors like smoking, high blood pressure, LDL cholesterol, triglycerides. And then there are certain unique risk factors in our country like diabetes. We also have a variety of other risk factors which could be important. Genetic factors also are important. But I think the most important topic for discussion today is quality of care or the quality of clinical care, which has certain deficiencies which we need to improve. Now, this is a pyramid which we have frequently cited. It is a CVD prevention pyramid. And what you see clearly here is that on top two columns is the basic clinical interventions, office-based control of risk factors, and management of acute coronary artery disease. But we need to remember that prevention doesn't start from there. Prevention starts from the social determinants, which are very important: financing, poverty, illiteracy, and there are multiple social determinants. You see here, there are macro level factors like location. If you are living in the rural areas, you have low access to healthcare, you have low access to high quality foods. There are certain measures of living conditions, social or human development, social status, income inequality, and healthcare service, which all depends on factors which are beyond the clinician's purview. But then there are certain other factors like education, like income, occupation. All these also matter because they also influence the risk of coronary artery disease. There could be multiple policy interventions, and in India we have lots of social and financial policies like universal right to education. We also have job guarantee schemes, mother and child health care, tobacco control, and we also have taxes on harmful products like cigarettes, bidis, and tobacco. There are certain taxes in sugar-sweetened beverages which could be increased. There are taxes on alcohol. And I also propose bans on trans fats, which has clearly been shown to be a very effective policy in many European countries. Then there are certain healthcare policies. We already have socialized and state-funded health services. There's an effort to increase the universal primary and secondary healthcare. Health insurance is important, and there are schemes like BPL cards, and drug price control, of course, is important. And there is lots of states in our country which have free medicine supply scheme. I also believe that medical education or the quality of medical education needs to be improved, needs to be focused. When we are medical students, we see lots of rare diseases. We see rheumatic heart disease, we see valvular congenital heart disease in cardiology, and we also see multiple livers, spleens, and lung diseases. When we go into practice, none of them is applicable. In primary care, almost 40% of people in India at least suffer from high blood pressure or hypertension. And there is only one small page in the book of preventive medicine and maybe half a lecture on importance of hypertension in clinical medicine. So clearly we need to refocus our attention on non-communicable diseases in medical education at the undergraduate level as well as the postgraduate level. But I think the important topic for us is the risk factors, and as clinicians, we all realize that the risk factors are important. Recently, we published data from the PURE study, which is prospective urban rural epidemiology, going on in 5 centers in India, one in Bangladesh and one in Pakistan. So they're collectively known as South Asia. And what we found was that at least 4 risk factors: hypertension, high non-HDL cholesterol, indoor air pollution, poor quality diet, and diabetes have more than 10% contribution to incident coronary artery disease. Clearly, we need to focus on these risk factors, but we can't forget tobacco, which is very important, and physical activity is also very important. Global burden of disease only last week showed that there are multiple factors and they are increasing. Fortunately, tobacco or smoking is declining at the rate of 1.2% per year. Dietary risk factor also declining. But ambient pollution, that means atmospheric pollution, sedentary lifestyle, body mass index, systolic blood pressure, and glucose levels are going up, not only in our country, but across the globe. So clearly, these are the risk factors which need consideration. What can we do? Well, pollution is an important topic. Indoor air pollution, although it is declining in our country, but we need to focus on that. And population-based interventions are clearly important for ambient or environmental air pollution. There's a long list. I won't go into details of all of them. Transportation reforms, shifting to clean fuels, reducing traffic emissions, urban landscape reforms, and at the home level, we can have better designed homes with better ventilation. We can have better household cooking devices and low pollution cooking methods. Food is important, but it is very difficult to figure out what to eat. And there's a great deal of controversy, which is the best diet for prevention of heart disease. Recently, in the last year or so, we have had 3 major guidelines. One is the Lancet Commission and the Eat Commission diet, which basically focuses on diversity of plant-based foods, low animal sources, high intake of unsaturated fats, low intake of saturated fats, low amount of refined grains, and highly processed foods and added sugars should be consumed less. And by and large, the same is true for European Society of Cardiology guidelines and also the American Society of American College of Cardiology and American Heart guidelines, which focus on vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, whole grains. So clearly, we need to focus on these factors if you want to have good quality diet. 3 dietary factors are controversial. One is the fats, saturated fat and trans fats. So as far as trans fats are concerned, there is no controversy. We need to eliminate them by voluntary self-regulation, by mandatory labeling, by reduction in restaurants and population level bans. Saturated fats, although guidelines have been saying year after year that we need to cut down on saturated fats, but we published data from the PO study again about 3 years ago, showing that it is not the fats, but the carbohydrates which are more harmful. Saturated fats have almost a neutral effect, although monounsaturated and polyunsaturated are good for you. But I think the focus now is shifted from fats to sugars and carbohydrates, and there is a clear U-shaped association of dietary refined carbohydrates and sugars. WHO has recommended that not more than 10% of calories should be from added sugars, and the upper limit is about 150 calories per day. Salt, again, is a controversial issue. For many years, we've been saying that we should reduce salt as much as possible by using population-based approaches, policies, or multi-component interventions. But we published these data from the PO study again about 5 years, 6 years ago, and they have been confirmed in multiple studies that there is a U-shaped association, especially in the tropical countries such as India, where we need a certain amount of salt. So now we have said that the sodium intake is between 3 to 5 grams a day, which will translate into about 6 to 8 grams of salt, which is less than the usual that we consume. But 6 to 8 grams of salt is recommended, not less, not more. Physical activity, no controversy. Everyone, including the WHO, recommends physical activity at least 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity or 30 minutes per day of walking. If you want to do more, you could do more, maybe in less time. So if you're doing vigorous activity like gym or treadmill or jogging, you could do away with 75 milligrams. But clearly, if you do 300 minutes per week, which is better actually. So you need to walk at least 60 minutes a day, 6 days a week. That's, I think, an ideal requirement. And there are lots of policies. As a physician, we could stress that we need to have neighborhood safety, we need to have access to open spaces, we need to have reduction in motorized vehicles. And COVID epidemic, fortunately, has increased the use of bicycles in our country. So clearly, there is some good side to the recent COVID epidemic. Smoking tobacco control, I won't go into details of that because the risk is big. It kills in middle ages and the stopping works. And at least in India, in our rural population, smoking, bidis and tobacco use is one of the most important risk factors for heart attacks in our country. And we should utilize every effort, including the government level controls and the individual level or practice level controls to combat smoking epidemic. Hypertension is important, and hypertension for prevention, I think the European guidelines are the most suited for our country. It has been defined in the European guidelines as office blood pressure of more than 140/90 systolic. If you are doing ambulatory blood pressure monitoring, the mean blood pressure of 130/80 or more is hypertension. And if you are doing home blood pressure monitoring, which I think is an emerging technology, 135/85, more than that is important. But I think more important than that is the control targets. We, most of our times, prescribe medicines and forget about targets. But unless you reach the target to a patient, it's of no use. I mean, just like a placebo, you give him some drug, effective drugs, but then if you don't titrate the dose to and the blood pressure remains above target, the risk is the same and there are no benefits. So clearly the initial target is 140/90, but in high-risk people like people with heart disease, people with diabetes, people with other kidney diseases and heart failures, the target is less than 130/80. So clearly the first target is 140, remember that, and the next target is 130. If the blood pressure is less than that, is useful. What I find in my own clinical practice is that one drug normally does not work. If a person's blood pressure is controlled on one drug, most likely it doesn't require any medication. And we normally initiate blood pressure with 2 or more drugs, mainly 2 drugs. ACE inhibitors or ARBs are a good choice, or calcium channel blockers like amlodipine or long-acting nifedipine also good choices. And diuretics could be an initial combination. And what is recommended in practice now in Europe, in USA, which we have been using in India for a long, long time, is a single pill combination therapy. And in our country, we have lots of drugs available as single pill combination. The most important risk factor is LDL cholesterol, and there is a clear evidence that more is the exposure of LDL cholesterol in a given patient, more is the cardiovascular risk. Now, this is an analogy, and as an analogy, what I can say is that if your blood cholesterol levels are high from 20 years of age, you have greater risk. If they're at high of 30 years of age, a slightly lesser risk. But if they increase beyond 50, the risk is less. So cholesterol years, the number of years which you live with high cholesterol, have clear indication, clear correlation with the extent of coronary atherosclerosis. So now we have a new guidelines, again, the European Society of Cardiology and European Atherosclerosis Society guidelines, which have reclassified the LDL targets in very high-risk people. That means people with multivessel disease, lots of atherosclerosis in the coronary arteries. The targets of LDL is less than 55. In high-risk individual, that means high-risk diabetic, high-risk hypertensive, high-risk stable coronary artery disease, the target is 70. In moderate risk, 100, and in low risk people, that means young age, don't try to achieve 70. At a younger age, 116 may be acceptable target. So if a person does not have any other risk factor, the target should be 116. If we have multiple risk factors, the target should be less than 55. And I think this is very important. And the use of high intensity statins is recommended. Now, what is high intensity? There is a great debate, but it was set by the Americans a couple of years ago. Atorvastatin, moderate intensity 10 to 20, and high intensity is 40 to 80. Fortunately, in our country, the 10 to 20 milligram of moderate intensity is the commonest dose used. And again, rosuvastatin 5 to 10, and high intensity is 20 to 40. So clearly, with not very high doses, you can be high intensity statin therapy. But remember, compliance is important. It's a lifelong, adherence to this particular therapy, because unless you do a lifelong adherence to therapy, even if your cholesterol levels comes down, and unless the LDL is less than 30, don't bother. Just continue with high dose or moderately intensity statin therapies. Now, these are the other lipid-lowering drugs. I won't go into details of them because Dr. Narula, just after me, will be speaking on lipid-lowering for heart disease prevention. But remember, there are 3 more drugs available to us beyond high intensity, like ezetimibe, which we can add to a statin, found to be useful. And there are at least two PCSK9 inhibitors available with us now, which can be used. Triglycerides is a very favorite of all of us in India because of the high prevalence of metabolic syndrome in our population, very high diabetes in our population. So triglycerides is a clear risk factor. And now we have certain evidence that lowering triglycerides. Now, this is the first study that reduced it, icosapent pentyl, has shown benefit in patients with coronary artery disease. There is a primary event was decreased by about 25%, and cardiovascular disease or acute MI cardiac events were decreased by 26%. So clearly showing benefit in both cardiovascular disease and coronary artery disease outcomes. A third more important lipid factor is lipoprotein A, and we all know that this is important. Multiple studies have been going on in India, at least for the last 30 years that I know of. And now we have clear evidence that they are useful. Fortunately, PCSK9, although a very, very costly way of treatment, but PCSK9 inhibitors are one of the major drugs which have shown to be beneficial. There are certain more monoclonal antibodies being developed for this particular compound, but they'll be much more expensive than this type of drug. We have been focused on HDL cholesterol for many years, but now because there are lots of data from epidemiology, lots of data from lifestyles, which showed benefit. Unfortunately, drug trials failed. The CETP inhibitors, famously torcetrapib, almost doubled the level of HDL cholesterol from mean 50 went to 105. But then it increased the cardiovascular outcomes. So clearly no benefit in increasing HDL cholesterol by drugs. And now we have genetic studies and Mendelian randomization studies. It have failed to show significant association. So clearly now it is a risk marker, not a risk factor. Other drug which we like to use for primary prevention is aspirin, and it's again a famous, very useful topical drug. But there have been a number of trials over the years, 14 trials, and a combination of these trials does not show any benefit of aspirin. And there are certain trials in the lower part of the whole graph which showed increased risk, especially in the elderly people. So clearly, aspirin for primary prevention, that means if a person does not have heart disease, don't give it. If a person has heart disease, yes, aspirin or antiplatelet agents have to be given, and sometimes they have to be given all life. Diabetes, again, I showed you as an important risk factor, and the classical ways of prevention like healthy lifestyles, no tobacco, healthy foods, avoiding of unhealthy foods, exercise are important. Pharmaceutical interventions in diabetes typically have not been very effective till recently. We all know that good diabetes control is important, but now emerging evidence showed that both SGLT2 inhibitors and GLP-1 receptor agonists benefit, and they are useful in prevention of heart disease in people with diabetes. So if a person with diabetes is at a very high risk, I will consider either of these two drugs as a first line. Of course, we need BP control, we need statins, and at least the American lipid guidelines have recommended that every patient of diabetes, irrespective of the LDL cholesterol level, should be on statins. Omega-3 fatty acids are important. Aspirin, again, in diabetes for primary prevention, that means a diabetic does not have heart disease, is of no use. Yoga, we all like yoga and we all look forward to yoga-based studies, and this is the largest of that type. ICMR in Yoga Care trial, published in the JACC by Prabhakaran from Public Health Foundation. And these are all patients with heart disease. And you see clearly that after the end of 24 months, there's divergence of graph. That means people who did yoga had slightly lower mortality, although not significant. But in the second analysis, which is known as landmark analysis, where we only included patients who were adherent to yoga therapy, there's a clear benefit, 27% relative risk reduction. So if you advocate yoga, tell the people that it has to be done regularly, it has to be done well, and you have to adhere to it. And the ultimate question which comes to us is that how can we achieve targets? We already talked of blood pressure targets, 130, 80, or 140 over 90. We already talked of LDL cholesterol targets, less than 70 in patients with heart disease, less than 116 in patients without heart disease, and less than 55 in high-risk patients. We already talk of diabetes targets, we all talk of triglyceride targets, we talk of physical activity targets. How can we do it? Now, there are interventions. There's a long list. I won't go into details of all of them. There are certain physician-specific, and I believe that all of you listening to this webcast are physicians. So we need to improve our education. We need to have audits on our own practices. We can have reminders using computers, task shifting, multi-professional collaborations, and combination of all these interventions. Then there are certain patient-specific. They're basically social factors. I won't go into details of them, but I'll show you 3 examples of that. One is task sharing for greater adherence and risk factor control. Now, this is a HOPE-4 trial published last year in the Lancet, and healthcare worker-based intervention reduced systolic blood pressure and LDL cholesterol in the intervention arm. So clearly, if you transfer your job from your practice to healthcare worker working with you, and he keeps on reminding people to take drugs for blood pressure, to measuring blood pressure, to take drugs for cholesterol, it does lots of good. Polypill is the other way. You could combine 2 or 3 salts into one. And the classical polypill described many years ago was basically a combination of 5 drugs. But now we have antihypertensives and statins. I think these are the 2 major components of drugs. And both, at least in Iran trial, they showed that both primary prevention and secondary prevention, there was benefit of polypill-based therapy. And finally, we need to remember that we need to provide high quality practice. And high quality practice is very important because just seeing a patient and prescribing is not real medicine. The real medicine is giving the patient satisfaction, giving the patient high quality of advice, and seeing to it that the patient adheres to your advice. And what are the definitions? I like the Harvard definition. IOM is a standard definition. We need to be focused on patient safety so that we don't do any harm to a particular patient. We need to be sure that what we are doing is effective. We need to be centered on patients. And of course, we have to be part of a strong health systems. So friends, my conclusions, what are the strategies is we need to focus on social factors, and UN Sustainable Development Goals are important, but these are mainly for the policymakers. As physicians, we need to be concerned with lifestyle modification. We need to advise everyone on tobacco, on healthy diet, on physical activity, on pollution, yoga. We need to manage our risk factors well. We need to decrease LDL if it is high, triglycerides if they are high, blood pressure to the normal range, diabetes to the normal range, and we need to have health non-physician workers with us so they can do opportunistic screening for better detection of risk. We also need to remove clinical inertia. We need to focus that targets are achieved. And for that, we have combination-based therapies. Long-term adherence requires not only patient support, but also education and some sort of pharmacological intervention. And only then we can enhance efficiency and decrease costs. Thank you very much. And we'll have a session on question and answers after this, so I'll be available for that also. Thank you.